Thank you. By show of hands, how many people in this room have to influence people to get change done? All right, so the one man that didn't raise his hand, he's either lying or in the wrong room on accident. Shouldn't be here. And how many people find that it's challenging to influence people to make the kind of changes? You see it, you understand the need, but they don't get it. Raise your hand again. That can be challenging. Exactly. So as Larry said, I'm going to talk a little bit today about the science, the brain science behind what goes on when we communicate to people. When we're using language to influence people. And how we can do that even better than we already do. Here's the great news. Everybody in this room already does this. You already use many of the techniques that I'm going to talk about today. Sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously. And let's say that maybe you're doing that 20% of the time, 15%, 30%. My hope for you is at the end of this hour, you'll move that up 5%, 10% of the time. The good news is the skills we're going to be talking about aren't just for doing quality programs. They also can help you at home. Now raise your hand if you'd like to have 10% more influence at home. There's a couple single people that said, no, I'm fine. I have all the influence I need with Muffy and Spot. I'm set. No problem. So we all can use this. And one of the exciting things right now about brain science and the discoveries that the neuroscientists are making is that we actually influence the way we feel far more than we ever thought. Now we don't control it. That's a myth. If anyone says, here's 10 ways to control your emotions, they are lying. Trying to sell you something. But we do have a lot more influence than we ever thought we did. Now, a number of people today have already asked me, why the title Chief Ignition Officer? If you haven't already figured out, you will by the end of this hour, what I do when I work with our clients. High energy, or it's going to get more and more as we go. And ignite. I help ignite passion for goals of my clients. So if it's quality, that's what we go for. Why? Why is it? We all know what really motivates people the most is what? Nope. It's not money, although money is one part of it. Recognition. That's all part of it. But it's all money and recognition for who? For the person you're talking to, isn't it? That's the key thing. But there's many things that motivate people. Money is one of them. Has anybody here, again, show of hands, have you ever read the Daniel Pink book, Drive? Okay, not a single hand went up. So that tells me one or two things is happening. One is there's going to be a lot of new sales of his book coming up because it's a great book on motivation. Or I got the name wrong and you just don't know. No. It's a great book. It's just out in January. I've heard him speak. And by the way, I have no connection to the man, and I get no royalties from his book sales. But it's a great book around motivating people. And he says, actually, in this book, from a lot of research that's coming up here, is that once money, by the way, for most people, is sort of the hygiene factor. All right, it's clean enough to work here. It pays enough. I'll work here. But what drives productivity, what drives change, is more intrinsic motivators. Sense of confidence and competence. How many people who feel incompetent really put their neck out? Think about that. A feeling of being part of something bigger than they are. If you feel like you're just a cog, one more cog in the wheel, why bother? You know we have one of the most amazing countries in the world, but our voting turnout, anybody know what that was last presidential election? And that was high, by the way, for us. 40%. You're all right, whatever numbers you just said. It's under 50. It's like in the 40s. Think about that for a second. We're determining the most powerful person in the world, and over 50% of the people don't do it. Number one reason why people don't vote, I don't make a difference. Think about that. And those 46% or so that came out, did somebody pay them? Occasionally. But for the most part, that's not the situation. Now, let me tell you just a little bit more about who I am, because I think it helps also to know something personal as well about people. So that's me a few months. Actually, I've been told recently that looks older. So that's me a few months from now. I went in the future, took that photo, came back and posted it because I want people to know what it's going to look like next time I see you. Okay, this is also me down here running with my dog. That's one of the things that I do. I really love to do. It's fun. We're actually running on the frozen pond that I live on here. I've got these little spikes on my feet, so it's the only time I can outrun my dog. It's great. When I talk about that feeling of confidence, I only get it for a few times every winter, but still, it's good. So a lot of things here in terms of flexible co-design. Even though I have this design, this next 56 minutes and 37 seconds, it's all designed, we're going to flex. We're going to go depending on where people are thinking, what conversations come up. I do a lot of things around changing cultures, managing conflict, and a huge percentage of the time, quality is one of the major factors. And we use these skills across the board, whether it's production, whether it's retail, whether it's finance. Matter of fact, a lot of the skills that I'm using here on this stage, I'm going to talk about some of the underpinnings in this brief hour here. And part of why I can be influential, part of why I often get hired to go speak to people and influence people is because I'm using some of the skills that we're going to be talking about. I also used to be really into gymnastics. I can still do a handstand occasionally. So that's something that's kind of interesting when you find out about somebody. Although I don't think I can juggle like the guy that was yesterday. Was he amazing or what? Yeah. It was incredible. I wish I was here, but it sounded good. I'm going to watch the video later on. All right, so here's our goal for the next, now I'm down to about 49 minutes and 12 seconds. Here's our goal is to increase influence. What I want to see happen is when we're done here, every person in this room walks out saying, I can do better now. I have some skills, I have some insight into who I am, I have some insights into how other people work. I have some plans already. Now, this is part of a 2-day workshop we're doing here, but even in just the next 47 minutes or so, by the way, I'm making up the numbers in case you're wondering. Anyone who can do math can tell that, but by the time you're done here, you're going to walk out, hey, here's an idea how I can increase influence in one situation, or maybe two. So no matter how well I present, you are the one that's responsible for your learning. And not just you. I actually want to have someone help you with this. So earlier, Larry had you turn to your left and to your right. I want you to turn just to one of those directions at this point. And I want every person here to have one partner unless there's an odd number of people. And I'm not talking about odd people, just odd number of people at your table, in which case there might be one group of 3. So here's what I'm going to do. Is I'm going to give you 73 seconds to do 3 things. Make sure you have yourself a partner. You're going to find out what that partner's name is if you don't know already. And you're going to ask this person, you're going to find out where is an area that you have to influence, that you really want to get better at. Everybody got that so far? 3 things, 79 seconds, go. Oh. Jay, you can join over here. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, you know what this means. You know what this means. You remember this. This means one of 2 things. Either pay attention to me or go into a Tibetan trance. It's up to you. So this is amazing. Actually, this is a real Tibetan meditation bowl. I went on a spiritual journey on the internet. All right, I'm not very deep. What can I say? But the nice thing about this bowl, because I'm going to give you a couple more chances to talk. Because the big thing, by the way, about people buying into change is you need to be able to digest each piece step at a time to really understand it. So I'm going to give you a few more brief times like this to talk about what you're hearing, what it means to you. Because that's what's most important, right? What it means to you and how you can apply it. And so each time when we're done, you'll hear this. And the wonderful thing about this is it takes about 30 seconds for the residents to kind of quiet down, which means you kind of close up your conversation. And for those of you that facilitate groups like this, I sell these for $9.99. No, just kidding. I don't sell them, but I did buy it online somewhere. And it is a Tibetan meditation bowl. So that's a good thing to know. So just quickly, let's hear 5 or 6 examples. Just raise your hand. I'll call on you. I'll throw it out. Where's the area that you want to increase your influence? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I would like to find ways of having financial people accept the quality people, work with them.
Nice. Finance people, yes. Finance people accept the quality people, work with them, and not, he said a bunch of swear words I can't say. That's right. Understand the importance of what quality brings to the table. So that's a really key factor. Matter of fact, raise your hand if you also would like to increase your influence around the finance folks. All right. So about 20 different people also agreed with you, feel the same way. All right, let's hear one more. A different one. Yes, ma'am. Senior management. I see a lot of heads nodding on that one. Yes. Being able to influence senior management more. Absolutely. And there was another hand up over here. Yes, ma'am.
It kind of goes hand in hand for a small company like that let his direct reports influence the way he helps runs the company.
Get the direct reports to be able to influence how he runs the company. Because truth is, actually, great quality programs have input from all sources, don't they? So everybody has a chance to influence the system. Anyone can somewhere say, hey, here's the challenge over here. Here's some ideas on how we can change that. Right, so everybody needs to have that happen. And who else would like to influence upper management, either yourself or to have other people be able to influence them more? All right, about half of you are lying because you didn't raise your hand. No matter how good you are, you can always get better. That's the good news about it. Even though I teach this, I'm constantly learning. Matter of fact, I'm lucky because I teach this, I'm hearing new ideas from people like you and thinking, oh, now that's a great idea. I'll try that one. Or, that didn't work. Let me try something else. That's how we learn a lot of different things. Okay, so you have your co-coaches. Now what I want you to think about in your mind is that if you commit in the next 40-something minutes to helping this person be highly successful in walking out of here with improved influence skills, and that person commits to you, you're going to have 2 heads working on your challenges. Both you and the other person. Or in this case, if you have some people have a group of 3, you're going to have even more. So think about that. And I want you to turn to your partner. I want you to take their hands lovingly. No, just kidding. I almost had you on that one. I want you to turn to your partner and just nod, saying, yeah. You don't have to say the words out loud, but your nod just says, I've got you. I'm going to help you. All right. Nice. And some people are even doing it. Yeah. Got your back. By the way, when you commit to somebody else's success, it is one of the best ways to influence them. Now, wait a second. I thought influence was about manipulation, tricking people. Yes, for some people it is. But for what you're doing, it's about seeing how to help that person be their best. We're going to talk a lot about language, but the number one thing you can do is find ways to make that person who you're trying to influence successful. And they're going to be 10 times more open to you than even the best techniques I'm going to teach you in the next 5 minutes. Or even 20 or 30. Now, there's a wise man back in the 1940s who said this powerful statement. And he was trying to change much bigger things than you are. If there's anybody too young to remember that his first name was Winston, Prime Minister of England, thrust into it like 3 or 4 days before England was invaded by Germany. And he was a man that most people saw as a pessimist. Come on, they're never going to attack us. But he actually kept looking to the future. Who are we going to be tomorrow? Who do we have to be to win this war? Who do we have to be to stay alive? Constantly looking forward. Focusing on all the problems. He could have spent a lot of time complaining about Chamberlain and how he was, avoided conflict, didn't build up the Air Force, all the stuff, but he didn't. He said, forget that. It's done. Let's move forward. It's the only way to make the changes we have to. We have to win everybody over. We have to be united. So I'm going to talk about some approaches and tools that are within sort of the strength revolution that's occurring now. So there's solutions focus, which is particularly popular in Europe right now and Japan. It's moving through North America. Positive psychology. Let's just see. Has anybody ever heard of solutions focus? Okay, 2 of me. Nobody else. Positive psychology. That's a little more common. Okay, thank you both for raising your hand. Appreciative inquiry. All right, a few folks. By the way, and all these are helpful. Appreciative inquiry is incredibly powerful because it's a totally different approach to quality management and many other things. It's not just saying what's wrong, let's do a root cause analysis, let's fix it. You're also saying what's working really, really well. It's amazing how many best practices are totally overlooked as we're looking for problems. So there's a whole field, and it's getting bigger and bigger. It's entering into quality. It's entering into psychology. It's all over the place. Building on strengths, not just deficits, not just weaknesses or waste, but throughput and quality. That's part of the way why your conference is called quality instead of killing waste. Stopping all those mistakes. Because you're not paid to kill waste or stop mistakes. You're paid to improve quality. So, but let's think about that. Organizations all across the board are using that these days. From the United States Coast Guard, which I've used the very tools we're talking about today to help them get out of a huge knot right here in Massachusetts. Banks, high tech, Air Force. Matter of fact, the United States Air Force every year, it's the Navy, has a 3-day appreciative inquiry summit. It's really a powerful event. Vital Cycles, this is for helping trauma survivors. Ministry of Youth Development, so churches all over the place. And the reason they use these skills is because they do these 3 things. They ignite passion for the goals. They don't just scare people. They ignite passion for the goals that you have. They involve people in meaningful ways to get great input, to get powerful buy-in. And they inspire the actions, the behaviors and attitudes that you need to get that job done. Do these 3 things sound good? Would these be helpful for you in your quality programs? Yeah. Those who haven't eaten too much cake were nodding. The rest are kind of going, nodding like this. Sorry, Bob. Falling asleep here. So here's the key thing, by the way. There's a part of our brain back here, and it's called the amygdala. If you've heard this, raise your right foot. No, just kidding. Raise your hand. Just making sure you're still, oh, well, somebody actually did it. Yeah, exactly. So the amygdala is a little part of your brain, and it's the one that's constantly watching out for threats. And one of the fascinating things about this amygdala is it doesn't know the difference between actual threats in the world and perceived threats. What's going on in my mind? Do you know what the #1 fear in America is?
Public speaking.
Public speaking. Uh-oh. I've got to take a break, sorry. Public speaking is the #1 fear in America. How many people do you know who have died from public speaking? Any broken bones? No? None of that kind of stuff. And yet, the perception in our head is terrifying. For those who remember Winston Churchill, you might also remember Barbra Streisand. Not a politician, by the way. For those who were too young, she was a singer. And one of the most successful concert singers in history. And she was also terrified of public speaking. She had terrible stage fright. She actually canceled a couple concerts. Was it because she was booed? No, she never started. She walked off before she could start. She was so terrified because the image in her brain kept telling her, I am going to die. Even if the conscious words are, I'm going to look like a fool, I'm going to mess up, whatever it might be, the back of her brain was saying, die, we're going to die. And because this part doesn't know the difference, the words you use on it, the images you create in their people's minds and in your own minds have an amazingly powerful effect. There was a little email that came out from Harvard Business Review today that talked about one of our best baseball pitchers. And I learned last week not to mention what team he's on, because then you get the yays, the boos, we're going to beat you up and all that stuff. And this team's great, this team is not so great and all that stuff. So I'm just going to bypass it. But he had a huge losing streak. He lost 10 games in a row, and he was constantly analyzing what he was doing wrong and getting worse and worse. Finally, he stopped and started playing back what he was doing right. And he shifted. Everything started to shift when he started playing that. Because the image in his mind guided what he actually did. But let's talk more about that amygdala. All right, so it's back right about there. Sort of right there. And here's what it's for. It's a really, really important part of our brain. It helps us with emotional learning. Whether peak experiences, great experiences, you know, if you remember that first kiss, the amygdala saw that a kiss happen and go, oh yeah, this is good, let's have more of this. Or something bad happened. The most common reason for people who are afraid of dogs as adults is what? Yeah, bitten as a child, scared as a child. Matter of fact, a woman came up to me last week after a presentation I did. She said, Bob, you know, I actually never saw a dog till I was 12, but I was terrified of them because of the stories my father always told about dogs. She grew up in India, didn't have dogs around the neighborhood, apparently. But she was terrified because of the image. Remember we went back before? The image in her mind of dogs as these evil, powerful creatures. By the way, I know people who are over 6 foot tall who have been bitten by a poodle when they're little. By the way, when you're 4, a poodle can kill you. Yes, it can. They just look innocent. They hide those nasty teeth. The challenge is, now he's over 6 foot tall, he weighs over 200 pounds, and he's still scared, terrified every time he sees that dog. He could drop kick the poodle now. But his amygdala still remembers it as this huge beast with big slavering fangs coming to his face level, about to kill him. That's how the amygdala remembers things. Every major fear you've had in your life, or major pain or loss, the amygdala says, I got to remember this so it doesn't happen again. That's why we don't touch stoves, hot stoves, more than once. The amygdala remembers. Now the amygdala, the primary thing is responsible for survival. It's also responsible, by the way, for 2 other things. One is looking for food, and the other one is mating opportunities. But we're not going to talk about either of those today. I apologize. But it's always watching. Which hopefully, by the way, wives, if you catch your husband's wandering eye, at least you can say, oh, it's your amygdala talking before you hit him. Okay? And by the way, when you hit him, that's your amygdala. Say, it's a threat. Now, the amygdala, when it gets activated by perceived threat, it responds with one of 3 F responses. And it courses biochemicals through our brain, through our body, in milliseconds. Incredibly fast. Now, the most common one that most people know about is the one that gives us lots of energy, which is called flight. Oh, flight is right, one of the F responses, but one of the most common biochemicals is adrenaline, pumping through our system. All of a sudden, we're like, ready to go. And another one, which is very common, is called cortisol. The nickname of cortisol, by the way, is the stress hormone. Because of the stress, when we don't burn it off, the stress that we feel in our body. And we feel it when we have stress, and it wears us down. It also, by the way, cortisol has this amazing ability to sharpen our focus. So let's just say for some reason I feel highly threatened by the gentleman back over there. He looks about 7'12". And I'm looking at him. Maybe my amygdala, he reminds me of my 6th grade gym teacher, right? Who used to make me run extra laps every day and humiliate me. And I'm like, oh, there he is. My amygdala just says, threat, threat, threat. So I'm looking over there and I'm worried about what's going to happen. And my amygdala goes into one of 3 reactions. So you already hit one of them. And by the way, the amygdala doesn't know the difference between this 12-foot-long saber-toothed tiger and my gym teacher. Or an angry boss. Or a poodle that bit me when I was young. So, which F response is this one here? That's right. So, if you can imagine tens, thousands of years ago, I was going to say one of our ancestors, but this guy probably got taken out of the gene pool. I mean, if you go after a saber-toothed tiger with a stick, you're dead meat. So, fight response, but it's common. Fight response gets people to do the stupidest things sometimes. I had a buddy who was about 5'4", soaking wet, and we're out at a tavern, we're having a pint of ale, and some huge guy comes over and insults him. And my buddy's like, oh, cool, let me at him. And he's literally going out. I'm holding him back. He's like, let me have it. I was like, look, Roy, he will clean up both of us with one hand, still drinking. Just back up. And he couldn't see straight. I had to pull him out of the bar. It's like, holy, thankfully, my amygdala wasn't fired off. Well, actually, mine had the opposite reaction, which was what? Exactly. I had the flight reaction. I'm like, he's huge. Plus, I don't want to get kicked out of this pub. I really like this pub. So this is a much wiser reaction. Although, guess what? We don't choose which F response we have. Our amygdala chooses for us. Like I said before, in milliseconds, like I think 30 to 40 milliseconds. Not that you can really time it, but 30 to 40 milliseconds, which literally, just for thought experiment here, blink. Yep, that fast. The prefrontal cortex up here is the part that makes meaning of it, saying, oh, that's not a saber-tooth tiger, that's a poodle. Or that's not a caveman, that's just my boss. Some people's amygdala still can't tell the difference. I can tell. But it takes a little bit longer. By that point, the amygdala has already fired us off. We're either fighting, we're running, or there's the third one. Who knows what this one is? Fear is involved with all of them. Fight is the first one. What's that? Nope. Freeze. There we go. Gold star to whoever said that. Anybody have a gold star they can lend me? All right. When you do, he gets it. So this is the freeze response, much less known. See, fight responses are obvious. You can see the fight response in somebody you're trying to influence. They're like this. Arrgh. Right? They're mad. They're yelling. Their tone of voice goes up. Or you can see the flight response. The pitch of voice goes up. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you said that. They leave. Freeze is harder to detect because they're usually not moving. That's why we say freeze. So in the freeze response, and that happens, by the way, to us. It happens to everybody. When we talked about fear, by the way, fear of public speaking, what most people are afraid of is that they're going to get up and they won't be able to say those first words. That they'll choke, right? Don't just freeze if you can relate to that one. Yeah. That's the freeze response, not being able to think clearly. I won't think of what to say. That's the freeze response. And by the way, it can be really important. Just imagine, this might be one of our healthy ancestors that actually survived. Let's just say he's out there and he's digging for tubers, bring some vegetables back for his family. Look through the weeds. And there comes the saber-toothed tiger. Literally, he doesn't have a choice. His brain kicks in and fills him full of some biochemicals that paralyze him for the moment. Why does it do that? Any guesses? Yes. He's hoping that cat, or at least his amygdala's hoping, he's not thinking anything at the moment, except for, oh my gosh, and oh, you know what, whatever language he's speaking. But he's just sitting there freezing, and the cat, wait until the cat goes by. And if the cat turns toward him, boom, triggers off a different response, and he's gone. Usually, by the way, you go from freeze to flight until you get cornered, and then you turn into fight. Exactly. So, yeah, there's some people over here who know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you? This is what happens sometimes at work. There's a group of people over here that said, yeah, my boss is like a caveman. Or in this case, anybody recognize this guy? Dilbert's evil boss. They're saying, oh my gosh. And we've all been in situations where we have fought with Dilbert's boss. Am I right? And here's the challenge, by the way. When you're sitting there and you react to this, you act like a caveman. When we have F responses, we don't think clearly. We don't think carefully. We just act, or react, as people often say. So I want you to give me an example. Where do you see fight responses when you're trying to enact a quality change process?
We argue.
We argue. Here's a very common one, too, when you're looking for the source of a problem. How often when you go to someone and say, excuse me, ma'am, so I'm trying to find out, it seems like the problem's originating in your department. Can you tell me where it is? How often does she go, oh, it was me? Yep, it was all me. Tell me what I can do different. I can't wait to learn the secret. Does that happen maybe about 0%? Yeah. Instead, of course, you would do that. We know that about you. But most people, by the way, their amygdala kicks in. They have a fight response, and they say, how dare you say that about my department? Or, it was Sam's fault. Go over to Sam. Sam says, it was Jane's fault. Boom. All over the place. Matter of fact, you probably noticed it, but sometimes the harder you try to figure out the problem, the further you get from the answer. The number one reason for that is F responses. People are too scared to tell you, or too angry. And so they keep obfuscating. That's a fancy word for putting up an ink cloud, scaring you, confusing things. Fight response. So with your partner, I'm going to give you 17 seconds. Oh yeah, that's tight. Where do you see fight response at work? Go.
When I want to change something, when I want to change a procedure.
The back of this fell, thank you. The back of this fell off. I can't figure out where it is.
Regulation from the state government the other day about hazardous materials at work. When I told somebody that they got to deal with it, I got that sort of response.
That's okay. That's okay. I'll just take it. Yes, if I have to. Yeah. Oh. Okay. Oh, yeah. They are not listening right now because guess what's happening? They're going through the fight response again. And then he said this. And then she did that. Oh, my, let me tell you about it. Shut up, Belle. Blah, blah, blah. Oops, is he speaking? All right. Where do we see a flight response at work? We're trying to initiate a change. We're trying to guide a change. Where do we see that happen? I'll get back to you on that, but they don't. Yes, and what was it over here? A little louder? Right, getting status, but not necessarily getting the actual status. Particularly sometimes I find people are saying, how are things going? Fine. Fine is usually a flight response. Fine is not a status update. Right, so those are very common ones. And this one's a little bit harder. Oh, by the way, not responding to emails, voicemails, right? Those are common ones. Or in the middle of a meeting and a tough topic comes up. Oh, I forgot to tell you I have another competing meeting. I'll be gone. See ya. You can send me the minutes or not. It's up to you. They're gone. Now, this is a little harder. Where do we see freeze response when we're doing change processes? Yes?
Yes, dear.
So that could be or a flight response, either one. If it looks like this, yes, dear, that's a freeze response. If it's like this, yes, dear, I'm going to the shed, that's a flight response. Where else do we see? Hopefully you don't say yes, dear, when you're in a quality project too often. Where else do we see freeze when we're managing quality processes? Yes?
You wait like get the solution in a few days later on.
Yes. You wait. And
Wait like 2 days to have the solution, not right away.
oh, right. When you need it now,
Yes.
but you wait. Because you don't want to deal with it.
Right.
And if it's an extreme freeze response, by the way, you can't even think about it. Now, we've all been there, whether you would remember it or not. But it's a part of our brain will actually sometimes kick in to distract us from something that we don't want to do. Right? When I'm paying bills and working on finances, it's amazing how much more time I spend playing with the dog. I'm over there and I all of a sudden hear this, Bob, dear, we were working on taxes. Can you come back to the table? Can we do that later? And I didn't even remember I was doing that. I totally forgot we were doing taxes. All of a sudden I'm playing with the dog. My brain just blocks it out. There's another word, by the way, that Stuart Smalley made really popular. if you're a Saturday Night Live fan. And it's not just a river in Egypt. What is that word? So now you get a lot of that with freeze responses. This is one of my favorite ones. You look at the reports. This can't be happening. All right, it's right there, black and white. It can't be. That's freeze. Literally will not look at what reality tells me. And we see that a lot, don't we? So I'm going to give you 72 seconds, because this one's a little bit harder, with your partner, talk about where you, here's the thing. You have two choices. If you're really courageous, where you do freeze or flight response. If you're only somewhat courageous, talk about where you see other people at work do freeze or flight response. 72 seconds. Go.
Whenever I want to volunteer for something, I certainly get a free flight response. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be an auditor. You want me to join the safety committee? I don't. Good job. Well done.
Freeze. I'm having a fight response. Okay. So let's just hear a couple examples quickly. Where do we see freeze, either in ourselves or others? Procrastination. Big one. And by the way, often it's hard to tell between which one is whether freezing or fleeing, but sometimes it's both. We do one, then the other, one, then the other. Yes, procrastination is a big one. Yes? Delivering bad news. When you can't get the words out. Yes, sir?
I'm putting things on hold.
Putting things on hold. Right. So that's the meta freeze. I've had that one happen a few times. We're well into it. We're $10,000 of investment into it. And the conflict is too big. And the person just says, we're putting this on hold. Till when? I don't know. I don't know is usually a really bad sign. If they're clever, they at least say indeterminate. But it's hard to be clever when you're having a freeze response. So here's the things about the amygdala, by the way. When we create F responses, when we have them in ourselves, when we create them in somebody else, I should say trigger them in somebody else, there's some side effects. So one is there's a decrease in your working memory. Because remember I told you about how cortisol really focuses you on what's happening? You ever been there where all you know is this one thing that's happening? Either because you're terrified or you're in love, one of the two. Which, by the way, there's a lot of common biochemicals between those two. Anyway, I'm focused. And I'm not remembering things because my body's only paying attention to how to keep me alive. So working memory drops when this is happening. Think about that for a moment. We work with a lot of knowledge workers. I've seen a lot of bosses who believe that the way to motivate people is by scaring them. And this is what they're doing to their employees, time and again. As a matter of fact, this decrease can last for up to 18 minutes from one jolt. Which means if you're really frustrated because you've had a difficult time with something, let's just say you got your project put on hold. I'm like, oh, my project got put on hold. And then I go tell my friend, I can't believe this, my project got put on hold. I'm yelling about it. What did I just start again? That 18 minutes. And then I go tell someone else, I can't believe it. It happened again. Put on hold, blah, blah, blah. Yelling and screaming. Start it again. The more I do it again and again, I'm actually creating the biochemicals in my mind that make it hard for me to do what I need to do. Now, we've all seen this happen, by the way. I was working with the board of directors the other day, and someone was talking about how funding's been cut. And she kept talking for about 5 minutes about how funding has been cut and how hard it is to get it. And I said, actually, let me just stop you for a moment. Our meeting here is about how to get funding. We already know how hard it is. Right? She's in this freeze mode. It's kind of like the mental equivalent of, oh my God, the sky's falling, the sky's falling, the sky's falling. Like, all right, we know, stop. What do we do about it? And she finally, it was almost like shook herself off and got focused again. So the questions you ask make a big difference in that. By the way, it also feels toxic. You ever had that sort of nauseous feeling at the end of a day? Things didn't go well, it's really difficult? That's the biochemicals that came up during the day that you didn't burn off by fighting or running. So they stay in there. They don't feel good. And that can last for 3 to 4 hours. That's pretty intense. And by the way, for both of you that are writing furiously about the notes here, I have about 10 extra, 15 extra of these handouts from a recent presentation, so I'll have them in the next workshop I'm doing next door. So you can, a few of you can have some of those if you want to. But you can also talk to me later on. I'll give you a free download of all the full language of influence handouts if you want later on. Okay, you also reduce your ability to see multiple options. On average, we can usually see about 4 things in our mind at one time. If you mix it up, that gives us about 16 options. A little bit of cortisol kicks in, you can see about 3 things. Mix it up, you got about 9 options. More cortisol, you can see 2 things in your mind at once, gives you 4 options. More cortisol, you can only see 1 thing, and that's going to be 1 of 3 options, which are what? Fight, flight, or freeze, exactly. So it drops you from 16 to 1. So the more we're having these F responses, the less functional we are, the more help we are, the more we blame, the more we yell, the more we procrastinate. Think about that. And you are talking about a specific word that scares almost everybody. Change. Just the word change triggers F responses for most people. There's a few people that say, woo, that's fun, let's do it. Because for them, boredom triggers an F response. But for most of us, it's different. Now I want to talk about something else. These are R responses. These are the kind of, what's that? Oh, somebody in the hallway. These are the kind of things, track me on this one, I'm moving all over. These are the kind of things, by the way, the R responses, when you're stressed out, your body has a different nervous system. R responses help you feel mellow, help you chill out, relax, recharge, and refocus. That was my hint, refocus. It's late, it's dinner, just had dessert. Relax, recharge, refocus. Now I put this photograph of the pond I used to live on up there for a reason, because that image helps me relax. I travel a lot. I was in San Diego yesterday. I'm going to be in Des Moines next week. I was in St. Louis the week before. So for me, when I come home, I live on a pond, I relax. Okay, I don't live on it, I live next to it, I should be clear. Actually, if I lived on it, I would probably just have a W response, wet, right? But I live on the side of it, it's a little different. Relax, recharge, refocus. And there's a lot of ways to do this, and I don't have time to go over them in depth. But solution-focused language, which we're about to talk about. Also, slow, deep breathing. Here's the good news, you can do it anywhere. You start to get an F response, you can do this, slow, deep breathing. By the way, if you're doing deep breathing and you're getting dizzy, you're doing it too fast. So, slow. And I've learned the best way to do this is actually going like this. But you don't want to do that at work. So instead, you can do it subtly. Slow, deep breathing, it literally starts to relax you. And it starts to exhale some of the peptides, some of the biochemicals coursing around your brain. Nice little technique. Positive imagery. Everybody has their image, some happy place you've been to in your life. I want you to think of that for just a moment. What's the place where you feel the most relaxed, the most safe, you really enjoy the most? You're like, wow, when you're there, you can totally let down your guard. Just think about that for a moment. That's a resource for you, by the way. Everybody's as unique as a fingerprint. So for some people, this photo is relaxing. For some, it's not. For some people, a cityscape is relaxing. Other, it's not. So whatever works for you. That's one of the ways you can help counteract the F responses, create the R responses, which, by the way, if you're into brain science and physiology, it kicks in the parasympathetic nervous system, which has to be active for us to digest food. So I'll try to be a little more boring in a minute to help you digest better, which also helps your immune system kick in. Without it, your immune system isn't active. So if you're not getting enough sleep, if you're not relaxing and recharging enough, you get sick a lot more easily. We all know that. Makes sense. Taking a break from the situation, getting out, cooling off, coming back when you're clear. Big help. Counting backwards from 50 for some people. Here's one of the most difficult ones, folks, but one of the most powerful. Thinking about the positive traits of the person you're upset with. Hard, isn't it? Very difficult. Once you can do it, you've shifted. So I moved recently, and there was a number of times where we were getting all upset, and I was mad, and there was a couple times that I saw her as the enemy. I will admit it happened. I had an F response, and she looked at me as the enemy, and I was so mad, and all I could think of was how she didn't pack something right. And my F response made out to be this huge issue. And I stopped myself and said, hold on, slow down, Bob. Think about what's really good about her. And then I thought about how she hugs me when I come home at night. And I thought about how sometimes on the weekends we go for long walks with the dog. And I started finally relaxing. But by the way, it took me about 5 minutes to remember those things. The cortisol does not want us to remember. Focus. She's a threat. Take her out. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? You've been there. The louder the laughter, the more often you've been there. Unless you're there all the time, which you're like, no, I'm not. I love this too, by the way, when people say, there's no amygdala in there telling me these things. That's your amygdala talking right now. Okay, another one, emotionally enriching experiences. I've been part of the Big Brothers program a couple times. It's fantastic. I think I got more out of it than the kids did. Such a great experience. Helped put everything in place. I actually just read recently in Psychology Today that it's the best antidote to depression is helping those less fortunate than yourselves. Stretching. For a couple reasons, by the way. It loosens us up, but it also, because if we're doing something that we would never be doing when a saber-toothed tiger is coming, it tells our amygdala we're okay. Right? Because you're never going to be doing this. Hold on. We'll fight in a minute. Not yet. I'm still stretching. I got this leg down. Okay. Now we'll fight. No. What else? I'm going to give you 72 seconds with your partner to talk about what do you do that helps relax, refocus, and recharge you. 72 seconds. Go.
Chocolate cake is good too. Chocolate cake isn't bad either.
Yeah, that is, I do walking. Yeah, I do a lot of walking.
Oh, yeah. Besides the bowl. We know that does it. For some people. All right. Here's one of the interesting things that we often do when someone's upset. You know, like when their slide advance doesn't work. There we go. Words create images in people's minds, everybody. So when we talk to them, we're constantly creating words in their minds. This is a key fact for language of influence. So for example, if you tell somebody, just don't think about your angry boss, they think about? Exactly. So what they do is they see this angry boss with a line through it. So their amygdala is still active. It's just, but now the amygdala is confused. It's going, oh my gosh, you'd be scared. But I cancel them out. No, oh my gosh, I'm scared. And here's the thing, images trigger emotions, like anger and fear. And by the way, there's a lot of derivations of anger and fear, right? Nervousness, anxiety, frustration, irritation, rage, whatever. These things trigger that. Jack Nicklaus puts it really well, by the way. Can you see that over there? Okay, then I will read it for you. He says, what we tell ourselves causes the whole body to respond to what the mind imagines is possible. When you're imagining something, your body starts to follow that. He also said that when I'm trying to hit the ball down the fairway and I've been hit in the trap, sand trap, if I think, don't hit it in the sand trap, what happens? My body actually says, oh, that's the image, let's go there. But instead, think hitting down the fairway. Even just saying, I want it to end on that blade of grass right there. There we go. You can tell I'm not a golfer, right? The way I swing. Here's some interesting research, by the way, in a capture lab. They looked at high-performing teams have 10 times as much positive language as negative language. Which means as soon as they find out what the problem is, they start talking about what solutions they want. They start talking about what is working, what else they can do. They brainstorm ideas. They say, that's a great idea. They play on that. It's important. But a lot of people get caught because their amygdalas get fired up and they have their ratios way off, and nobody wants to work with them. If you want to inspire change, you have to have at least a 10-to-1 ratio, people. But not too high. If it's 12-to-1, they calcify. Because then nobody wants to look at what's going on. You still have to be able to identify the problem when there is one. Sometimes there's just an opportunity, not a problem, just opportunities. But you still have to talk about what doesn't work 10% of the time. But 90% talk about what does work. Because then you trigger the right kind of responses. So for example here, what do you see on this slide? 15 cookies. What else? A hole. I'm missing one. So 2 simple responses. So let me ask you this. When I say, hey, we got 15 cookies on the tray, you think what? Someone does. But how do you feel when I say we have 15 cookies? Yeah, thumbs up, you're excited, more dessert. Woohoo! When I say there's a cookie missing, you think, what do you... Oh, exactly. Oh. We miss it. 2 accurate ways to describe the exact same thing have totally different responses. We can hear that. Woohoo! Cookies. That's where you got the dopamine and endorphin flooding through your body. One missing. Uh-oh, panic, F response. Who took that cookie? I've had people say that in the middle of a conference. I'm like, it's just a photo. But her amygdala doesn't know the difference. She's already mad. It happens. So reframing is really key because most communications are like snapshots. We just blurt them out. Any photographers in the room? Okay, just 3 of us. Excellent. So as you 2 know, before everybody else, with a camera, if you just go snap, it's just a snapshot. You don't really know what it means. If you're careful and you frame it correctly, it can come across and convey what you want people to see. Same photo. I mean, same location. I just stepped back and took a different picture. Now we're going to do a very brief reframe game here. And this one, you're going to turn some F responses, things we blurt out, into solution-focused language that frame and create the emotion that people want. Very quick. And here's an example of reframe. Instead of saying, how do we address the problem of high waste, we say, how can we increase quality throughput? People can get excited about the second one. First one, usually defensive, if they have anything to do with it. Another one, we have 15% scrap. That's a real problem. It's wasting money and killing pride. It may be true, but it doesn't inspire people. Fingers start pointing. But instead, we have 85% quality. How do we increase that to save money and improve morale? To beat our competitors, whatever it might be. So what I want you to do with your partner, you've got not a lot of time. See how many of these you can reframe in 90 seconds. Ready? And go. So 3 minutes? 5 minutes? Okay. And then
I figure you're working number 2. What do you got? Well, we can figure that one out.
Okay. I wish we had more time because I'd love to hear these. When we have a full-day workshop, we list them, we have ideas, we share them, we have competitions, all kinds of things. Because I'm sure there's a lot of great ideas out here just for shifting these around to make them much more effective. Now here's the thing about these reframes. It's not magic. It just increases your probability of success dramatically. Because now you're working with people's brain chemistry instead of against it. You're helping use the way our brains work to help galvanize where you want to go. A lot of times when I'm brought in when there's process is really struck, it's because they've been communicating in such a way that's just been scaring everybody into fight, flight, or freeze mode. Here's the thing. Create passion for change. Ignite passion for the goals. Involve people in meaningful ways. Get their buy-in, get their input. Inspire them. Here's our chance for about 3 minutes and 12 seconds of questions. So what I want you to do is raise your hand if you have a question, and if you don't, don't. Who's got a question about language of influence? Yes, ma'am.
Can you go back to that other slide and take a couple minutes and give us some examples? Not that one more.
This one right here.
Of reframing.
Okay.
We need a little bit more work in this area.
Yes, this is a challenging one. So, for example, instead of people just don't care about quality, you could instead say, people want to take pride in their work. How do we help them do that? Think about that. Instead of saying the customer service takes way too many steps, how can we streamline it so it's easier for us to do and more satisfying for the customer? Instead of saying, I doubt we'll be able to accomplish such a challenging change project, you can say, what are all the things we've learned so far that can help us accomplish this project? And use it as a best practice for the future. High waste is killing us. By the way, whenever you use words like kill, things like that, it scares people. We don't realize it, and yet we come up with words like deadline. Here's one of my favorite ones. Let's do a post-mortem. Oh my God! You're dead, we're going to dissect you! We don't, in the creating passion for change, we're going to talk about this little, I will talk about it next in my workshop, but there's 3 questions that you can use to address these things that really help shift it. And it's in the handout as well. Very simple. First, what's the goal instead of what's the problem? Where do you want to go? It has to be a positive goal. 2, what's already working? If you want people to work with you, talk about what's already working first, so they feel like you're on their side, so you learn ideas that you may not have thought about before. Then 3, what else can we do to get to our goal? Instead of what else are you doing wrong that we should stop? You get the same answers, but with excitement when you talk about what else can we do. Same answers, but a lot better ones and a lot more enthusiasm. And if nobody's answering your questions when you ask these questions, it's usually because there's an F response happening. Like when I first asked, there was this huge audience-wide freeze. So those are some. And by the way, I just threw those all off at the top of my head. But if you want, after the next workshop, I'll hang out as well. I can answer even more for you. But I bet a lot of your colleagues have some great ones. We have time for no more questions. So before I move to the next piece, I just want to say thank you so much for your participation, for your questions, for your humor, and staring at me for this long time. Thank you, everybody.